Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Roberta Bassi, and I'm a publisher on the HART list. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this session in which we will be launching Bart van der Slot's last book, Regulating the Synthetic Society. There will be a panel over the next hour or so. I hear there will also be a quiz with a giveaway, and there will be time for questions at the end. Without further ado, I'd just like to introduce the author, Bart van der Slot, and I'll hand over to him. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here. It's a great honor that you all came to the upper floor. So I'm Bart van der Slot. I have legal background and also a philosophical background, and I specialize in technology, and basically always try to ask, like, a new technology emerges, what does that do to our society, and how can law help steer it in the right direction, basically. So this is also what I did with the book on AI, which I will talk about. So I will give a brief overview of the book, just to give you an impression of what is in the book actually. Then we will do a quiz, and the winner will win the book. Welcome. And then we will move to a small panel. Ayman Taimur and Chris Hoefnagel are here. We're going to discuss like several issues related to AI, several jurisdictions as well. And then open up the floor to questions, discussions. I think you all have your own experience with AI. So for me, the most interesting thing about giving these talks is hearing your impressions or your questions or dilemmas. And that way I also learn a lot. So, this is the first law of van der Sloot, is when you talk about technology, the technology fails you. Yeah? Okay, super. Maybe I should step more in this direction. So I talk about generative AI, capacity of AI to generate text, but also movement of robots, videos, photos, audio fragments, what have you. So, and I discuss 4 technologies in particular: the humanoid robots. Maybe you've seen OpenAI's video on a humanoid robot they made, and also recently the speech assistant, which is super real in terms of audio, giggling assistant. The second technology is, oh, you're just gonna, should I? Oh. Oh. Oh, it's just slow. Okay, it's just super slow. That's good. We have the time. Second technology is deepfake technology. So you heard about it probably. Capacity of anyone basically to generate videos or pictures of other people, where you can have them say or do something they never really said or did. Augmented reality and virtual reality kind of in combination, where you either add a layer to physical reality or kind of replace, hey, hello, welcome. Where you replace reality for a virtual reality. So this is the OpenAI robot. I have a video, but in sake for time, I won't discuss it. So where are humanoid robots already applied? I want to try to be as least futuristic as possible, and these robots are already applied. For example, in Japanese hotel chain, I've been there, and it's fully manned by humanoid robots. In airports, in shopping malls, it's used a lot. Why? Both because these robots are physically capable, but also they can speak any language in the world, basically, through the large language models. They're used in medical settings, so both for physical care, for giving drugs to elderly people, but also in terms of loneliness. For example, in the Netherlands, there's a crisis among elderly people, no one wants to visit them basically, and so they just put a robot there, a social robot, to sing songs. Whether that is actually helpful or really cynical, I leave that up to you. But that is one of the usage of the humanoid robots. It's used by NASA, Robonaut it's called. It's used especially in Asia as robotic au pairs. I of course discuss challenges with robots in terms of security, hackability. It's going back and forth. Okay. Terms of loneliness, like what will we do when everyone is replaced by robots? The reason in an airport I go to a person when I'm late is not only to get the right direction, but also to look someone in the face and see like, okay, this is gonna be fine, and just to calm me. And the question is, can a robot really do it? Maybe in time, but right now not so much. And there's of course, hey, hello, welcome. A more futuristic question: will robots, AI replace human jobs, basically? And it's already happening. This has always spiraled, this question, ever since the invention of the loom, basically. Oh, people are out of job, and it never really happened. We always find new jobs for ourselves. Whether this time will be different, we will have to see. Deepfake technology, so you can have celebrities say or do anything you want. You have, what can you do with it? For example, it's used, it's going back again. It's used in high schools to let Napoleon give history classes to school children, so he can tell about his age and which decisions he had to make. You can use it for video calling to, for example, Chinese or Japanese colleagues. You can each speak in your own language. AI not only automatically translates what you're saying in the other language, but also lip syncs it, so it really looks like you're speaking Chinese. You could use it for satire. Dali is able to give a tour around his museum. You can bring back to life your ancient grandmother who is deceased sometime. You can have virtual fitting rooms to see how your clothes would look at your body. But it's also used for a lot for sex, deep porn, basically, right? It's difficult to estimate, but some reports have found that 96% of all deepfakes online are deepfake porn, non-consensual porn about women. Usually celebrities, but also it's increasingly used in high schools against girls. Catastrophic effect on their well-being, right? It's used as a way to impersonate people. So you can impersonate the CEO of a company and say, okay, you have to transfer a lot of money, but it's also used, of course, in more daily settings. The child seems to call their parents saying, hey, my wallet was stolen, can you transfer quickly 100 euros or something? And that is already used a lot. You saw fake news, but also fake evidence is introduced in courts a lot. So right now we're still able to filter out most, but the expectation is that a lot of fake evidence will be introduced in courts because it's so difficult to detect. Augmented and virtual reality. Yeah, there we go again. It's so you can use it for gamifying, you can use it for manufacturing. First actually popularized augmented reality by Boeing. Not sure whether that's a good example anymore, but they use it in factories to kind of let the mechanic know, like, hey, you missed a screw, or you should now do this or this task. It's used, Wikitude, for example, you can project information next to objects. You can bring to life characters in books, so reading can be made more fun. There's companies who allow you virtual travels. So for example, you could go to Antarctica without leaving a carbon footprint, or it's used in terms of people want to see catastrophes happening in the world. Apparently, that's one thing I learned when doing research in this book. And you could go to the catastrophe, earthquake happening somewhere, can see, walk around without actually hindering the emergency personnel working there. Again, medical settings it's used with the it's interesting that seeing yourself in virtual reality as an avatar has a lasting imprint on your brain also in actual reality. So if you have body dysmorphia or you have certain traumas and struggle with that, seeing your avatar in virtual reality behaving in a certain way it kind of rewires your brain in a certain way and leaves a lasting imprint on physical reality as well. Dangers, of course, long-term effects, unsure, addiction, loneliness, you name it. What does this do to democracy? So it's used a lot to influence democracy through fake news, for example. Courtrooms are struggling with it. Media, the estimate right now is that in 4 or 5 years' time, about 90% of all online content will be affected by AI. Right? And usually that is really marginal affected, but AI is already in a lot of technology. So for example, in photo cameras, they now operate on AI, which means that it's object recognition basically. So they see the moon and they impose on that a pre-established picture of the moon. So on a blurry night, you take a photo of the moon, you get a super bright moon back. Or if you photograph a burning forest, it doesn't come out red, it comes out green because the AI, between brackets, knows that the forest is green, right? So video calls, etc., all these have small AI manipulations in them already. So we will be moving to a world where instead of saying, okay, material is probably authentic unless there are contraindications, we will have to say probably material has been affected by AI, and often that wouldn't merely matter for the purpose of the content, but it might, and you have to check who actually manipulated, why, how, etc., etc. What does it do to social contact? What does it do to learning? There was a talk already in this conference about friction. So one thing AI does is remove friction. So if you go to a country, you can have an app scan the ticket and translate it to your language. So you don't have to learn, that's better. Okay. Okay, super. So you don't have to learn the language yourself, right? Or if your partner deceased, you can bring the partner back to life. So you don't have to face the trauma of losing your partner. Or if you're bullied at school, you can flee into a virtual reality world. So everything it kind of does is remove friction from your life, while it is through friction that we learn and develop as a person. Students do not write essays on their own, but have ChatGPT help them or write it for them, right? But it's through the difficult learning process of writing an essay that you actually learn and master the topic. So if you remove all the friction, you remove a part of why people evolve over time. Yeah, it works. So finally, and then we will move to the quiz, I kind of tried to map what this does to the law, not only how the law applies currently to AI, but also maybe do we need to revise the law in order to tackle problems. So one, I'm just going through it really briefly. Intellectual property. One of the questions is, if I ask an AI to compose music in the style of Taylor Swift. So it's not a Taylor Swift song, but it has learned from Taylor Swift songs and generates a song in the style of Taylor Swift. Who owns copyright on that? And that is a question that is currently not really certain. Data protection. There has been discussion for a long time about post-mortem privacy, but right now with the ability to bring back to life people from the dead, the question is, do I want to be brought back to life by my partner when I die? Do I want to give a speech at my own funeral, as sometimes happens? Do I want to be exploited as a famous artist, for example, and tour around the world when I'm dead? Or should there be legal protection? And right now there's very minimum legal protection. Election interference happens a lot through AI. For example, voice cloning. In America, you had the Biden robocall incident, but there are many, many more. Should there be prohibitions on using deepfake technologies during election times? In certain American states, there are these kinds of prohibitions, but only 2 or 3. And in Europe, there's basically no specific regulation on this issue. Court evidence, right? Right now, the standard in evidence for court is materials deemed to be authentic unless there are contraindications, and often people have to say this is not real. But that's not always possible for people to say that or claim that. People might have mental disabilities, people are convicted in absentia, they are not always there in court. So there are many instances where people cannot really say, I believe this to be fake. So should we move this around and maybe say evidence is deemed to be inauthentic and people have to prove through, for example, a watermark that it is authentic, right? Criminal law, there's discussion among others, but I'm just giving some examples about should we criminalize rape of avatars, right? There are women who have reported on this happening who say this is a horrendous experience to them because you do identify with your avatar to some extent. Is it the same as real rape? Of course not, but it's still a direct violation. Liability law, I discuss security. Should AI have a kill switch? Would that even work? Or could AI override the kill switch because it's more intelligent than certain human capacities? Consumer law, competition law. So for example, one of the many issues in the AI world is quasi-mergers, which is non-official mergers, but Microsoft have found really inventive ways to move around competition law and get their hands on other companies without formally having their hands on it. Discrimination law, bias, one of the many problems. Frederick has wrote about it more often than me. So I give a big list in the book as well, kind of signaling other authors. You should look to Chris Hoefnagel, Frederick, you name it. One of the many problems with discrimination law is that it right now often discusses the end result of a decision. So a decision, has that the effect that it's discriminatory, or is it based directly on biased data, but not the whole process of the training of algorithm. Where have data been gathered? Is that done in a neutral way? How was the labeling done, etc., etc. So that whole process before the decision making, actual decision making, is not covered by discrimination law. Maybe it should. Finally, the more futuristic discussion is, should we move to some kind of rights for robots or AI? There is a discussion about sentience and artificial general intelligence going on right now. So there were already Google employees who said we have reached that moment. No one really believes that to be true. We have not reached that moment yet. Probably will be, if ever, it might not happen, but if after 30, 40 years or something, that it will happen. But when I speak to technologies working in this field, they all say probably if it goes like this, the accelerated speed with AI right now, then we will arrive at the point of artificial general intelligence and sentience. I'm in ME, so one of the panelists, we had a podcast with a technologist, and he said, well, it's not right now that this will happen, but in 50, 70 years time, for example. So, and then the question is, okay, if we have a sentient being who is self-aware, should they have rights? Should there be moral limits? Right now, for example, you have sex robots, right? People want to marry their sex robots already. But if it's highly highly intelligent, is that allowed, or is that a modern form of slavery? Right? Something, so these type of questions will emerge, but really in the future. Okay. And the main goal of this book is not to give answers. I only raise questions, so it's a highly disappointing read. Because I don't have the answer. There is no right or wrong. Each legal problem and each legal solution has its own problems, which I explain in the book. So it's all a matter of debate, basically. And that debate is something we should have together. Okay, we're going to play a game, and normally this is called hats on, hats off, but I didn't bring my hat, so it's right arm up, left arm up. So the game is this: everyone stands up, and we're going to do a quiz. And it's either the correct answer, left hand up, or the correct answer is right hand up. If you're wrong, you sit down, you're out of the game. If you're right, you can remain standing, and the next question emerges. And the winner gets the book. And the publisher has kindly offered to make that available. Okay, and we're gonna see whether you can verify who is the real person and who is the AI-generated person. And you could know all these persons because they're public figures. So if you're just generally good in knowing the prime minister of whatever country, you will win this quiz. Okay, so left hand up if you think this is the authentic person. Right hand up if you think that is the authentic person. Okay, the people with the right hand up can remain standing. That, Chris, is Pete Buttigieg. Yeah? Which of those two is the real person? Left hand up if you think this is the real person. Right hand up if you think that is the real person. The people with the right hand up can remain standing. Oh, this goes quick. This is a Dutch minister and now UN ambassador, Janine Hennis. Which of these two people is the real person? Left hand up or right hand up? Everyone is right. This is Aung San Suu Kyi, the right hand. Yeah. Which of these two is real? Are you still in the game? Yeah? You? Okay. Left hand up is correct. That is Arsen, what's her name again? The Arden, yeah, exactly. Which of these two is real? Are you still in the game? Yeah? Okay. Left, right, okay. Left is correct. He looks fake. Who is this? Does anyone know? German folk singer Heino. Come on. Which of these two is real? This is a joke. They're both fake. Okay, you can all remain standing. Which of these two is real? What have you chosen? You have to choose. The right person is real. That is Japanese Prime Minister. Very good. Yeah. Which of those two is real? Left hand is real. Sorry, who is it? Raymond van Groenewoud. Belgium folk singer, really good. Which of those two people is real? We just have two persons in the game left. Right, this is good. Who is it? Rory Stewart, yeah. British politician. Final question. You're both right. Do you know who it is actually? Sorry? Yeah, it's fake, eh? Yeah, you see it. If you look closely, you see it's fake. This is Lynn Yamada Davis, whose cooking TikTok videos delighted millions of people. I didn't know as well. Okay, we move to the shootout question. Right, so the one who is closest will get the book. I will ask a question. Okay. Last week, American Congress, in a bipartisan move, said there should be more funding on AI, right? They already funded quite a bit of AI, but they want more. How many more dollars did they say should be invested per year by the government? The person who is closest will get the book. Who wants first?
I'll go 400 billion.
400 billion? 2.5 billion. Then you are right, it's 32 billion. Congratulations. Yeah? We will bring it to you. Okay, congratulations. So this is just a funny thing to see, like how difficult it is already to distinguish real from fake people. And also experiments have been done that people find faces of non-existent person more reliable and trustworthy than of actual person, because often they have a more symmetric face. So for the other people, you can take out your smartphone and download the book for free. It's open access, so if you scan the QR code, you just have the book. Also feel free to send the book around, or send the link to the book around, send the PDF around. It's open access, it's for free, it's for everyone to be had. Thanks to the publisher as well, so they make that available. Yeah. 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 Okay, you have it? Super, super, it's working. Okay. Before we move to the questions, I want to ask Ayman and Chris to come on the stage and take a seat. So, due to technical reasons, we just have one microphone, so I will ask the question and then give it to you. And I'm super proud that both Chris and Ayman are here. They are people I work with personally and admire for their intelligence and warm personality also. I will ask you both to briefly introduce yourself. And then maybe say what you think is essentially new about AI and where you think the technology will stand in 10 years from now.
Happy to start. Thanks. I'm Chris Hufnagel. I'm a law professor at the University of California, Berkeley, and I'm on sabbatical at King's College in their War Studies department this semester. It's a real pleasure to be here. Before answering your question, I wanted to say what I like about the book and where I think the value is, and the value as your presentation just showed is in the descriptive account of just how rich this technology is and the use cases. It's very exciting, and I think you do a great job presenting the different ways in which these technologies are exciting and good for people, along with along with some of the potential difficulties we're going to have to face. And I'll just say, if I could add one thing to your very good presentation, we ought to deeply consider disability and how these technologies will help the disabled interact with the world in ways that they could not. So I think there's a lot of potential there, a lot of pro-social potential there. And then on some of the downsides, what I like about your book is how much it emphasizes the issue of loneliness. I think people are lonely, and the kind of app addiction, the always on the phone thing is something that's a real phenomenon that we need to wrestle with. I think people will look to generative AI for their relationships. There's already people who do. I'm a big user of ChatGPT and Claude and Mistral. And in the ChatGPT API, you can train up, individual GPTs. And I have one that tries to simulate my spouse. Now, I told her about this recently, and she was not happy. But I was going with this could you have a long-term conversation with a computer? And no, it does not replace my spouse, but it is more conversationally sophisticated and gifted than most people. Okay, so I think that's something to think about. And so the idea that we might replace significant portions of our intimacy with these technologies, and I'm not talking about sex, I'm talking about just intellectual intimacy, I think is close. The other aspect about the book that I really like, and I wanted to say, and it's uncomfortable to say, but it is the reality of that these technologies will be used for sex. Several years ago, I wrote an article studying pornography websites. It was a very difficult academic article to write. Even finding information about the pornography industry that is of academic quality. Like, how big is this industry? It's very difficult, impossible to find. People don't want to touch this stuff. It's actually very difficult to study. I'd have special protocols to protect my students, and so on. We were studying the privacy elements of pornography websites. So this is an issue that, not even academics who are protected by social, all sorts of different protections, they're not willing to really engage with. But I think it's just under the water. There's a lot of this that's going to be repurposed for some healthy stuff and maybe a lot of unhealthy stuff that we ought to be thinking about. I'm talking for a long time, but I'll say that this aspect of using these technologies potentially for people that one knows, and the ethics of that is a very interesting question. And if any of you all are Star Trek nerds, I love Star Trek. You'll remember that Lieutenant Barclay created a simulation of his coworkers in the holodeck. And some of it was about sex, but some of it was also about people in his life that he didn't like, who were lording over him. And in this simulation, he could be the powerful person, the person who punished these other people, his commanding officers, and so on. So I think there'll be a lot of simulation uses of these technologies that maybe are therapeutic, but also raise the question of whether there is an injury if I create a simulation of, let's say, my coworkers that I use to work out my anxieties. So let me stop there. And I actually didn't even answer your first question, but I also wanted to give you a chance to, sorry to talk about the book a bit.
It's okay.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. So my name is Eamon Temur. I work on manipulative AI. I'm a human rights lawyer, and currently I'm doing a PhD at Tilburg University. So my interest is, it stems from the relationship between machines and human beings. And in the last years, we've seen that people are, like you said, everyone has a phone in their hands. And say 10, 15, 20 years ago, this was not the case. There were very few people who had it. Similarly, now AI technology is open access. Anyone can use it. It's so user-friendly. Even a 5-year-old can have a conversation on ChatGPT. So that is a massive shift that we've seen over the years, and it's only going to get even I think it's going to be across the globe in other countries. People are going to start using it even more and more because there is a huge divide between the global north and the global south when it comes to the usage of tech. In my experience, I do feel that we will start seeing the disadvantages or the advantages of legislation way before the legislative activities are kind of hyped up in the global south. So we are following in the path of innovation without the guardrails in the global south. So that is something that I really particularly am focusing on. And also with my research, I am looking at how different factors such as democracy, sense of self, consumerism are impacted by manipulative AI. And more than that, I would also say that our general conceptualization of human rights and what we understand ourselves to be as human or what a machine is, those lines are going to get blurred over the years. With artificial intelligence, I think the most fascinating thing that we're going to see and we are seeing right now is just the mimicry of intelligence and how perfect it might eventually end up becoming. And to the point where like machines might be smarter than we are. So I think that's the kind of the scary future that I'm looking at and that I focus on. But that being said, I think that, the synthetic reality, the very concept of how our environment, whether it's internal environment or the external environment, is no longer going to be real. And the idea of what reality then eventually ends up becoming in the future, those are the ideas that I think I was really gripped by in the book. And again, those definitions of what reality means and how we perceive our surroundings or ourselves is going to keep on changing, and it's going to keep, I hope it doesn't go down, like it doesn't go bad for us where we no longer know who we are and we no longer know how to distinguish. I mean, we can already see with deepfake technology that we can no longer tell whether a person is real or not. But also I think another very big fear is how we as human beings might end up having our senses made blunt over the years with over-reliance on tech for information or for or that trust might be to our detriment over time. So I think that's like in short my interest in the book, where I see tech in the future and how it's changed now.
Thank you. So maybe you could explore a bit more, like Chris can talk about the thing he didn't have time to talk about, where we stand in 10 years' time. I think from what I hear you say is it will be used a lot for social contact and social interaction. That this is my hope and fear as well, and I think you're right, it will have a huge impact on people with disabilities, like people who've lost their voice, for example, can have deepfake voice and speak again with their own voice instead of a mechanical voice. Augmented reality can be help for blind people navigating the street, for example. So there's a lot of these, and to go to sex, like there are a lot of people with disabilities that don't have sex because of their disability. And there, for example, a love robot or what have you could actually help to have a healthy sex life. So maybe you can pick that up and discuss what in 10 years' time do you think will be the new questions or relevant topics. And also, because Chris, you've wrote a book on quantum computing, which you should all read because it's a really good book, I think. And I think both these technologies, if they will progress like this in 10 years, 20 years' time, there will be a huge impact, especially their combined effect will be huge. And you work on many different topics, but one is integrity and manipulation. Ayman won a prize already for her paper. She's just working for a year and also already won prizes. So she's one of the brightest people working at our university. And maybe you can talk a bit more about that and the effect of AI on those topics. Chris, could you?
Yeah, so I can't say what's going to happen in 10 years from now, but like some frameworks to think about. One is that these technologies are general purpose technologies, so they have no purpose. And so in particular, and many of the uses that we are concerned about, think about the deepfakes problem. The flip side of that is that most of us are going to actually want deepfake technology. An example would be if you ever shoot an online course and you realize there's a mistake in your online course, wouldn't it be excellent to essentially reshoot that segment without reshooting it, right? Make my avatar say the correct law or the updated law rather than the one I taught a year ago. So I think we're all going to want deepfakes, and in fact, we're not going to be able to control it because the Disneys of the world, the movies they create are synthetic, and we're going to want those to be more and more realistic. So I see that only getting better. But my general point there is that a general purpose technology has to be thought of differently than something that is more narrow. I think another thing to really worry about is that ChatGPT, in my experience, outperforms humans in a lot of different functions. So there is a test that's done in the it's actually done worldwide in literacy and writing called the PIAC. And if you sit down and you read that study, you'll see that a huge percentage of people in the world have only basic literacy. They can't write a letter to the editor in a newspaper. They are not able to do high-level writing. So the good news is that GPTs will make it possible for them to do things that they should be able to do, like write complaints when they're wronged and so on. But it also does show the deficit in human achievement. That is scary, and it's scary for those individuals' economic futures. Eamon also pointed out that these technologies are widely available. They're also learnable. And if you all watched the ChatGPT demonstration last week, the one with the Scarlett Johansson voice, if you watch that, it's on YouTube. It's 30 minutes long, but you can just forward to 5 points in that video that are really salient. In one of them, ChatGPT tutors the demonstrator through the camera. So the user writes out an equation and asks ChatGPT, "Don't tell me the answer to this equation, but help me step by step solve it." And so he does a step of the equation, and ChatGPT says, "Yes, that's right, that's good," but then he makes an error. That step-by-step tutoring eliminates people like me. And I think it's great for some of the reasons you pointed out, that the world is going to have personalized, someone smart sitting next to you, helping you think through a problem.
That's a very good point, but I'm a bit of a traditionalist, so I think that my only problem, and I think the concern, is that we might end up putting technology on a pedestal, and then we might not even be able to develop our own intelligence, our own skills in a way that we would normally. So what if there comes a point where our abilities, our innate abilities, are so not built upon because everyone's relying on ChatGPT to write an essay? Students no longer have to use their critical thinking, and where do we leave the space for that critical thought and critical ideas? I understand. I see the benefit of it, especially when it comes to, say, countries where the education sector is not that developed. They don't have enough teachers. Technology can definitely play a positive role, but then again, should we be at the mercy of technology that way? And over the years, when we start becoming more and more reliant, eventually we will be losing our abilities to do these tasks ourselves, or yes, traditional education also has its issues, but instead of working on our problems, we use this easy fix, like a Band-Aid, just going to ChatGPT, asking it to teach someone, or learning from ChatGPT. So I do have those issues and those concerns. And another problem that I have is that an average person does not really understand the computing behind ChatGPT. So there is also there is somebody who knows more about these programs, and that's usually the developer or the person who has put this program forward, which means that there is always a backdoor that the user is not aware of. And that, again, leaves room for manipulation, to take place for companies to push forward things, whether it's AdWords or whether it's ideas that the person on the receiving end might be completely unaware of. And this manipulation over time can change people on a fundamental level. It can make right-wing people left-wing or left-wing people right-wing. So, and that eventually also, ties into whether or not democracy will be fit for purpose in the future, when people will no longer be in a position where they can make informed choices because of heavy reliance on technology or because of manipulation, even though they're not relying on technology, but the technology they're using is manipulative in nature. So I do have these questions in my mind and a bit of fear as well for the future.
The European Union, especially right now, is pouring out act after act after act. The AI Act, the AI Liability Directive is coming up. Products, machine products, everywhere. Data Act, Data Governance Act, what have you? New GDPR updated proposal. So a lot is happening right now. And so much so that I sometimes fear for the consistency between those different frameworks. It's quite unclear to me how they affect each other or overlap each other and what happens if they do. And I wanted to ask you both, like how maybe EU laws are approached in different jurisdictions. Chris obviously comes from the US. You worked a lot in Asia as well. And maybe how other respective jurisdictions approach AI and what we could learn potentially from each other.
Well, so in the US, regulation of these technologies is coming from several different viewpoints. So one is the copyright risk that you mentioned. So copyright owners want some type of control over these technologies. Some of the regulation is styled as privacy regulation, so that often deals with inputs. In the US, it's often inputs like what information is collected, whether it's truthful. There's anti-discrimination regulation that typically deals with outputs, as in, was this decision made fairly, or was there bias in the decision process. The other interesting thing that's happening in the US is there is sometimes local regulation of machine learning. An example is in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have 2 different city-level privacy commissions, one of which has prohibited one of which controls law enforcement acquisition of technology, and this body has limited the San Francisco police from acquiring face recognition, which is pretty interesting, and maybe we could talk about that later, the upsides and downsides of that. So the regulation is coming from all sorts of different areas with different motivating theories. And just as someone who's worked in this space for a long time, it's given me a lot of whiplash, because as a baby lawyer, I was part of the, you cannot regulate the internet thing, and CDA 230, and the world would end, like the Earth would stop revolving if CDA 230 were anything were to happen to it. I mean, that has been the narrative in DC for a very long time.
Does everyone know what
Oh yeah, so this is our platform. Yeah, this is our platform regulation that makes Google and Microsoft and Facebook immune for user-generated content. So if I post something terrible about Bart, I get sued rather than Facebook, right? So this is a bedrock law. And with machine learning technologies, everyone's racing to regulate. Super interesting. There are laws of general applicability in the United States that apply to machine learning. And interestingly, the Fair Credit Reporting Act, America's first data protection law, passed in 1970, applies to machine learning and has regulated it for a long time, for decades. Credit models that are like to decide whether or not to give you a credit card have to be based on fair data, and they have to be contestable decisions. That comes from a 1970 law that was written based on performance standards rather than technology specificity. So that's a real lesson, is your regulations that are based on performance standards and that are not technologically specific can be used when new technologies come along if those technologies are fundamentally compatible.
And how do you feel about technology-specific regulations? Like, for example, there's been discussion over should voice cloning be prohibited. Would you support that, or would you say rather we should have general standards?
So I was going to get to this at the end of our discussion. Voice cloning is another one of these technologies that we might all want in some contexts. So for instance, to create an audiobook of your book, you would do that with a voice clone. And 11 Labs can do that for you. They've got some interesting controls. The company realizes that there is this problem of impersonation, and so they have some technical checks to stop the user from cloning someone else's voice that are quite clever. So they know that that's coming. But like a use case for voice cloning you absolutely want today is my book, audiobook, right?
That's actually a very, I think I would like to carry on the conversation from there. I am actually not a critic of over-legislation because I feel like the more regulation that you have, the better picture you have in terms of the protection for individuals. My only concern would be that with all these new laws coming out, the corporations should not choose which laws they get to cherry pick. It should be binding, everything should be binding on everyone. And as long as we can ensure that, I don't mind many, many laws coming out. I mean, it's kind of hard to keep track of as a lawyer, but then at the same time, it is giving more dimension to the protection that every individual gets to have. That being said, having worked in the policy-making space in Pakistan, I have seen that the European laws, or when it comes to tech law from Europe, it's looked at as an inspiration, but it's not necessarily adopted as it is. Laws are generally kept quite flexible to attract investors from, so tech companies are attracted to these safe havens where the laws are not that strict, and that ensures the pouring in of finances. And unfortunately, that's the situation. The laws are kept loose for that purpose. And I think one thing that Europe can do is ensure that its trade partners at least have the same level of protection of private data, or like when it comes to the tech, it should be regulated in the same way in these countries, the way that it is in Europe, because I think it's very selfish to have just laws in Europe and then not care about other countries that you're dealing with or that your corporations are also working with, because then they can go and commit the same level of crimes somewhere else. So the protection should be quite holistic. And
Can I ask?
yes.
Because one counter-critique is that Europe is kind of a new colonial power imposing its laws and regulation on the whole world.
I agree, yes. But I think there should be general standards. And I mean, Europe is already creating a lot of laws. Why not create a new set of standards, like just something that other countries can look at and know that if we have to work with the EU, whether it's in tech development, whether it's for selling of products, we need to abide by these rules. I mean, the EU has a lot of trade agreements with countries across the world, even Pakistan, a lot of spaces, even smaller jurisdictions or places that don't necessarily have a very thriving tech culture. But there are rules which kind of regulate whether it's import of like food, or we can take examples from other areas. But also the culture, the institutional culture and architecture in Asia is quite different to Europe. So China, for example, has released its interim measures for generative AI, but again, they are so loose. And the reason why that they're so broad and not really that helpful is because the government itself is a party to so many violations of fundamental rights, including one example where in Beijing there was a protest and the protesters did not have phone signals because they cut off phone signals when there are protests happening. So they used airdrop instead. And then the Beijing municipality ended up boasting about it, saying that, oh, we have developed technology to break through the encryption of the Apple airdrop, and now we know who's sending messages during the protest and who's communicating the protest activities. I mean, if your government is boasting about stuff like that, and they're also the ones making the laws, I mean, really, it's a bit of a joke, honestly. So, But that being said, there are also good examples. For example, Japan has, they engage in something called agile governance, where they conduct multi-stakeholder conversations and policy consultations, like they're done on a regular basis, and the law keeps getting updated with time. That way there is nothing that escapes regulation, which is something that I think that Europe can also engage in, but I do understand that in Europe it's hard because there's so many countries and then there's so many different stakeholders who might have competing interests. But I think agile governance is a very good thing to look at when it comes to regulating tech. Yeah, I think that's it.
So what would you say to the critique, though, that, I mean, is it a mere coincidence that so many of these technologies came out of the United States, which, you know, we basically let people break the law? Look at Uber. We know there's Mistral here, right? And that they're an important domestic competitor. But how do you think about the innovation, the innovation regulation trade-off?
I mean, yes, we do know why most of the innovation came out of the US, and that is because of the culture of allowing companies to do what they want to do for profit. So, yeah. While engaging in that capitalist dream, well, you know, it's a reality. But then, again, I do also think that foreign policy also has a role to play in this, where, say, for example, if Facebook is doing something wrong in Pakistan, the state of Pakistan is probably never going to bring a case against the US. So I do understand that innovation is important, but not innovation at a cost of fundamental rights or at the cost of the rights of people living in third world countries. I mean, somebody does pay a price, and unfortunately it's not the people who are making the innovation or profiting from the innovation. It's unfortunately people who are on the lower end of the economic spectrum who are getting exploited. So yeah, I mean, innovation can be good, but not at the cost of human rights.
Yeah, thank you. Yesterday I was on a panel on AI as well, and I said this exact thing, like there's a lot of discussion on AI development, the original sin, as it's often called, like just scraping the internet basically and violating intellectual property rights, data protection rights, privacy rights. So I said, like, if we want to be strict in Europe, like none of these models that are American created are legal, and we shouldn't allow them on the European market. And next to me were like European regulators, and they were like, no, we got to be flexible about this, and of course we want the advantages of AI. So you see kind of how everyone is in doubt, and this American model just breaking things and moving on is kind of also adopted in Europe. So we're a bit we have a strict legal regime and we keep it this way, but reality being different, we allow and condone it. So it's really, yeah.
Just share an anecdote about this. I was in a conversation here at CPDP with colleagues who were talking about Mistral and then, you know, the idea of creating the Germans did make a search engine, and they also made a social network to compete with Facebook. Didn't work. Well, okay. Well, you have Mistral. And let me tell you that I have a French colleague who I adore, and I don't always understand her. And I don't always understand her use of language, but I study her email, and like when she writes to me, I study what she says. And she wrote to me recently and used the term obscurantism. And I think I have an idea what that means, but what does it mean when she says it? So I asked ChatGPT, what did the French mean when they used the word obscurantism? And it gave me a really bad answer. Like, it gave me a stupid answer. I asked Mistral the same question, and it precisely nailed it, that it connected the concept to liberalism and to the Enlightenment and so on. And I thought that's what she was trying to tell me, but that's the value of a domestic LLM.
I agree.
Your culture.
I also say one thing in my book, like Europe, and we should build our own AI models, and that not only take into account our legal standards, but also our cultural standards. And because now, like I spoke to a person yesterday also, and she was working for companies, and she said, we buy these American standard models and apply it into European practice. It doesn't work because it has American cultural normativity in it, and it responds in language ways we wouldn't respond. So you have to build it all anew if it want to be really functional about it. So yeah, Okay, also given the time, one last question, just be brief, and then we open up the floor for questions, critiques, remarks. So what do you think about the current legal regime, and if you have to pick like one or two things in the contemporary legal regime that should be changed in terms of AI, what would that be?
Okay, so I realized in my punch list, one thing I wanted to say is that the Convention 108 Plus is super important. And I think that's worth study because it applies to military and intelligence. And that's actually what I study at King's College. I study military machine learning pipelines. And so 108 Plus is super important. The other points I'd point out is some of the harms that you painted are addressed by existing law in the United States. An example, tort law defamation, which seemed to be dead. 20 years ago when I first became a lawyer, defamation seemed like it was a dead tort. It's actually come back to life. And there are aspects of deepfakes and LLMs that will make it easy to prosecute defamation cases. So when you can find the person who's made a deepfake, there is a theory for going after that person. And then I'll just finally say is that we have to think as a society about truth-making technologies. So there is a collaboration amongst the camera makers, Getty Images, and so on, being coordinated by my colleague Hani Farid at Berkeley, that it seeks to impose a watermark in photography that is resilient to editing. So you can crop your picture, you can attune your picture, but if you alter the meaning of your picture, this watermark breaks. Well, I think we need a similar technology for every single politician, and I even imagine this being hardware that one wears, like a piece of jewelry, that sends a signal that can verify time and place so that one cannot alter the content of that imagery.
Yeah, so for me, I think, again, coming from a human rights background, I would, again, just keep on saying this over and over again, that human rights need to be at the forefront of everything that we do, and that needs to be the starting point for every legislation. Even though there's usually multiple provisions within legal instruments that say, we're going to be deferring to human rights or to human rights standards. In practice, unfortunately, it does sometimes end up taking a back seat, and we need to have stronger procedures in place which ensure that human rights compliance is at the forefront, even when at the development stage of new tech. In addition to that, I am just thinking about when we spoke about different laws coming into place all at once, the coherence is a very big issue. So they need to be complementary to each other, and we need to have a better, kind of a symbiotic relationship between them, so that as people who are going to be probably discussing these laws in court at some point, or even as academics, we also know what we're talking about, and that we also have a picture in our minds, and that also helps developers, or even when it comes to computer scientists. And I think we need to have a very clear conversation about power imbalances within legislation as well, because the stakeholder, the public being the stakeholder, is not the same as a corporation being a stakeholder. So power dynamics need to be talked about, and I really like your point about the truth-making technologies, how we need to encourage their development and maybe even make them as common as synthetic reality-making machines, to balance the scales a little bit.
Nicely put.
Thank you so much for all your thoughtful comments. Now maybe for discussion or question, just speak out, and if no one can understand it, we will repeat the question in the microphone.
Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for the inspiring discussions. So I have a handicap. Even at law school, I didn't do. I'm a lawyer, but even at law school, I didn't study competition law. But I know that it is, and that's understandable, often quite slow. But one of the many fears that I have, I see promises too, but lawyers tend to prefer discussing risks. Out of the many fears that I have on generative AI is that it will consolidate power in even fewer companies now than we have already. And currently we already have a problem. I'm from the Netherlands, one of the richest countries in the world, and even our regulators are basically afraid to so deep that they can keep appealing and appealing and appealing in courts and basically drain the budget of a regulator. That's already the situation with the internet, and I see even more consolidation now, perhaps in a few years, maybe one Chinese or two Chinese and two US companies running these general purpose AI. May be the only companies that can pay for all the electricity needed, etc. I was wondering whether you have any thoughts, and hopefully also positive thoughts, or like approaches for possible solutions.
Well, yeah, I will say something first, and then maybe you can also respond. So I think that we don't know yet whether this will be true. So Frederick's question, for those who didn't hear it, was like, will these companies become even bigger monopolies, basically? It's not sure yet whether this will happen. It looks like this, but also Meta, for example, put their large language model open access online. There are Chinese models now, and there are several. Saudi Arabia is trying to build their own model for Arabic languages. Mistral is coming up. So we don't know yet. My fear is the same, like yours, and this is highly likely, but let's hope that we can still tackle it. And what we could do about it is break these companies up, for example, or better, I would say, public institutions should create their own large language models. So the European Union, or even the Netherlands, they did now announce that they're going to try to build their own large language model. So if in Europe, for example, we would sponsor EU building a large language model of our own, which we would use in educational settings, in medicine, you named all these public tasks, and only use the large language model that is publicly funded and publicly managed, then that could be a good counterweight. That would be my solution to the problem.
I just want to, I love the question and decompose it a little bit. A lot of it's going to depend on the technology we're talking about. In my book with Simpson Garfinkel on quantum technologies, we have a chapter on quantum simulation that explains what quantum modeling would look like. And this is a situation where a company that made a model could be applied in many other places, creating fantastic value, wild value. Being able to displace things like some human subjects research and some animal subjects research would be very exciting. And that would be a model that had a ground truth in physics. And you wouldn't want competing models. The model would be the model. So that's an interesting competition issue to think through. And I think the other issue to really think through, because it has societal level effects, is natural language processing. You know, when you do translation, and so NLP, the categories of technologies known as NLP, one function of NLP is to translate, but often when it translates, the middle of the translation is English. So if I'm translating German to Spanish, it's going German, English, English, Spanish. This is important. And if I had a language, if I were Finnish or Norwegian, or if I had a language that wasn't in the top 5, okay, German, English, Mandarin, and so on, I would be making these models, because your language is going to be squeezed out, and your language is going to be understood through the lens of English, for better or worse. So I think there'll be very interesting competitive dynamics coming from this.
And also, I think because a lot of languages might go extinct because of this as well. So their protection is absolutely vital. I think Chris and Bart have like pretty much addressed this, but I would probably say democracy can also play a role in AI. So democratizing AI could also be a solution, where because again, like we said, it's about public values. So the public should be able to have a say on which values it wants to preserve and how it gets to preserve them. So that could be a possible solution.
Marianne, did you want to say something or
not? Thank you for your comment, and Bart, congratulations on the book launch. My name is Mariana. I'm from Data Privacy Brazil, which is a Brazilian organization working on data justice. And I'm also doing a master's in philosophy at Tilburg University. I was interested, I also have a background in law, so I was thinking about the discussion on the current legal frameworks that are being either have already been approved or are currently being discussed, and how, mostly because of how complex the technology and the issues being regulated are, there is this move to more procedural laws as opposed to substantive protections. And I think that makes sense because, of course, there is so much complexity and the technology is ever changing and it's contextual. So you focus on having the correct procedures so that better decisions can be achieved. But then the question becomes like, who is actually being empowered by this legislations if it isn't the actors that are developing and creating these technologies, and then they have the power to assess whether the technology should go forward, which is, I guess, the case with the EU AI Act. And of course, there are some countermeasures, for example, with prohibited uses. But I wanted to kind of address this and ask about your opinion about that trend. And what are the more substantive protections that should be in place? And also you talk about the precautionary principle as something that should perhaps be adopted formally by regulators. So I wanted to hear your take on that as well. Thank you.
Do you want to go first?
So procedure can be quite helpful, and it's kind of an equalizer when it comes to incorporating regulation in corporate activities. But again, like you said, it does end up empowering certain parties over others. One of the things that I've seen recently is with the new AI Act coming out, and like every time I look up the AI Act or if I'm like researching on it, there are so many AdWords from companies saying that they offer, these services where they can give you a certificate of your alignment with the AI Act principles. So again, new actors get involved, and then regulating them also becomes an issue. So sometimes regulation can end up empowering parties, and then they end up becoming so it's like a bit of like a cat and mouse game where you can win some, you can lose some. But I do also believe that procedure law can be quite beneficial, and like Bart mentioned in his book, the precautionary principle, it will help us somehow also regulate before an issue occurs. So it is really, really quite helpful in essence.
Just quickly, like a helpful example of procedure-driving substance is the Fair Credit Reporting Act. And the United States requires maximum possible accuracy in credit reporting, but also that facts can be investigated. And what this means is that prior to the Fair Credit Reporting Act, credit reports included information like Chris drinks too much, or Chris keeps an untidy home. But you see, these facts are not verifiable. They basically can't be investigated and verified. And thus, credit reports in America do not contain such information at all. So there are ways to tune procedure to come to good substantive outcomes.
Yeah, I'm a bit conflicted about this approach. I don't know. At the one hand, I'm super proud of the EU stepping in, and like Chris said, there's a real momentum of really regulating AI rather than letting it go like we did with the internet or social media, which we kind of all regret and think okay, maybe we should have stepped on earlier. So we do that right now, and at the same time with the AI Act, for example, if you boil down, it basically says document stuff and be transparent about it, right? And that is a good basic starting point. But my fear is that it will stay at this level. And I noticed this sentiment among European regulators, hey, we have the AI Act, it's cool right now. And I think I'm a bit disappointed about the technology-specific rules. I tend to be more in favor of those. At least in the beginning of the technology, we don't know yet what's it going to be used for? And I'm more cautious maybe than Chris is, as this is also a cultural divide. I see those positive use cases like Chris mentions, and I'm hugely in favor of them. And I think we will end up in a world where these technologies will be used for the better. But right now, I would be more cautious and take the precautionary principle and say, like, we do not want just to throw technology out there and see what happens, and then something goes wrong, and then maybe we can regulate it in a couple of years' time. I would say, like, no, we're gonna be cautious about it, and then maybe allow at first the positive use cases we know this to be positive and use it, and then see and build from there. So that's what I hope for the EU will also do. And I'm not sure about the AI Act. What I gather from discussion is that it's not the final say, it's more a jumping board for the European Commission to implement decisions on the basis of that. Oh, well, hey, super. You should join this panel because my colleague Irene is going to do that, and she is super bright. So that is also a good final answer, I think. I don't know, but I'm scared. So thank you so much. It was a big honor that you're all here. Share the book with whomever you like. Thank you.